What's good, YouTube? Just about an hour ago, I released my BM Hunter Guide for PvP Legion Patch 7.0. So it gives a good overview of how to play BM Hunter, so go and check that out if you haven't already. But this one's all about Unholy Death Knights, because Unholy is back and probably better than ever. Just talking to a couple of other DKs and testing myself how they play out. So, really strong and almost better than Frost, it seems. I used to play Unholy back in MOP. They killed the spec in WOD. It was all Frost DKs, but I think Unholy might be the main spec to go for in this one. So, we're going to start off just as always. With every guide I do, we look at the talents first, and we'll talk about playstyle, macros, and that pretty much covers it all. So, first off, we'll go through some of the spellbook things here, because some have changed. So, Corpse Shield is a new heavy defensive we have. It's actually a talent that you spec into. We'll check out talents in a second. We have also a talent there. We'll talk about that later. Asphyxiate is back. You have to spec into it. Dark Transformation is now a 1 minute cooldown button. You don't need to 5-stack those death coils anymore. Chains of Ice, doing the same thing as always. Death and Decay is good. Also pairs with Clawing Shadows, another talent we're going to talk about in a minute to help spread dots if you wanted to. Deathcore, the same. Death Strike's the only heal we have these days. No more Death Siphon. Festering Strike is now one of the main abilities you'll use. Our Scourge Strike, or if you're spec'd into it, the Clawing Shadows, is our main damage dealer, just as it always used to be. And Outbreak is now different. Just one rune, no cooldown, chuck it on, and it puts on this new dot that we have called Virulent Plague. That was disgusting. Anyway, that dot. So we'll just forget I stuffed that up, and then we'll talk about Wraith Walk, a gap close or a getaway, which is really interesting because DK has always been one of those very high damage dealing but slow classes. So now we have a 1 minute cooldown, 70% increase to movement speed for 3 seconds. So that is pretty interesting. Plus we have our 15% disadvantage still passive. And Runic Corruption is now a passive that every DK gets, or every Unholy anyway. I'm not really sure about Frost, but that covers it. Pet, exactly the same. Still his leap ability. Still has his pet stun, which we'll talk about. It's one of the macros we'll check out soon. But that's the quick overview of abilities. Other than that, nothing much has changed, other than the talent choices we have here. So, after some testing, especially when it comes to the Tier 3 selection and the Tier 100 selection, the bottom one, I really tested those two out myself. This seems to be, currently for patch 7.0, the best setup you can go for, especially when it comes to duels and, arena, PvP, but duels especially. Like, Unholy DK is one of the very hard classes to beat, it seems to be, in a duel. And we'll talk about why that is. So, a new feature that we have is these things called Festering Wounds. So we put them on through Festering Strike. It can put on between 2 to 4 Festering Wounds, okay, every hit. So guaranteed 2, maximum 4, and they stack to 8. So within 2 hits, we can get these max stacked Festering Wounds, and we burst them with our Scourge Strike. So Bursting Sores here is a really nice passive you can spec into, as it deals 50% more damage when burst on each one of those Festering Wounds, which you're popping them all the time, so it really does add up to do some nice damage. And the other two, all will serve, really isn't that good of a choice, just get a second minion. And the other one's all about just doing more damage with that plague we get from Outbreak. So first selection, Bursting Spores, I go for. The second one, Blighted Rune Weapon, just helps you get those Festering Wound stacks up nice and quick. If you're running out of runes, if you're rune starving yourself, I would recommend going for the second one. You don't really run into that issue too many times unless you use too many runes on Festering Strikes, but we'll cover that when we talk about the playstyle. Now, Tier 3. After testing, what did I test a lot of? I tested on a Holy Frenzy and Castigator, I also believe I tested pretty heavily. Each festering strike, critical strike applies addition to festering wounds. Clawing Shadows is the way to go here, I believe, just because it does a flat higher damage than the Scourge Strike does, and is your main ability pretty much. You're putting your dots on with Festering Strike. So say you get 2 hits of Festering Strike and we get our 8 stack of Festering Wounds, we then get in a good, 5 hits with our Scourge Strike. Now, Clawing Shadows does more damage just baseline than our Scourge Strike will. So, there you go. 5 more hits of just more damage. Castigator could be alright, maybe, especially when... please note, too, I didn't mention, but this is real early pre-patch. So, things can change if Blizzard are happy with balance. But even more so if when the artifact weapons come in and we get new abilities, or maybe it buffs certain ones, they may then become, you know, the main go-to. But this is the most solid setup, I believe, right now, especially when it comes to duels. So I would go Clawing Shadows over Castigator. Now, the next one, if you're versing a mage, if you want to, you know, really close the gap, you can use Outbreak to slow them by 50% for 3 seconds. So you could probably nearly spam that, as long as you're not going to starve yourself with runes. But Asphyxiate, a 5-second, you know, 45-second cooldown, big stun. Everyone knows Asphyxiate, how strong it is. Just too good of a talent to not go in. And if you really want to line up a big burst, again, this is the one to go for. The Sludge Belcher is really handy here and can be very versatile. We'll just talk about that quickly, because if you spec into it, I did test this one as well, you get the Abomination. Now, one of the abilities the Abomination will give you is a, think of, it's just a death grip, really. It's a death grip for your pet, though. So if a mage is a perfect example, hits you with like a Frost Nova, or I think that's the ability a mage is called, where they hold you together. It's normally going to hit you at the start, out of stealth. You're stuck right next to your pet here. If it's the Abomination, you can use his ability to grip the mage to you. The mage might then freak out and blink. Then you also have your grip to pull him back. So as you can see, really nice gap closer. But Asphyxiate for every other class other than a hunter and a mage is probably the better choice. The tier 75 choice here, Lingering Apparition, is more about our Wraith Walk if you want to be very quick all the time. Not really that good. Corpse Shield, though, when it comes to PvP, for the next 10 seconds, 90% of all damage you take is transferred to your ghoul. So as long as your ghoul doesn't die, you'll be okay. But if they do manage to kill him, it's a 30-second cooldown. Remember that. You want to keep your ghoul up. So you could almost have a macro, actually it's probably worth making one, that heals your ghoul with, oh no, it restores energy now. So, well, just make sure your ghoul doesn't die, honestly. But Corpse Shield, 90% damage you take is transferred to your ghoul for 1 minute cooldown. Really nice. And the other one is just extra anti-magic shell. So, not the strongest choice, except for if you are versing a heavy, you know, caster comp. We then move on to the tier 90. The best one here, I feel like, is Infected Claws, just because it's so easy to handle. So your Ghoul's Claw attack has a 35% chance to cause a festering wound on the target. So it just puts another wound on, which you know, saves you some runes instead of having to waste them on Festering Strike. Our main damage dealer is going to be our Scourge Strike or our Clawing Shadows if you spec into it. I did test Necrosis. I was very interested in this one. Dealing damage with a Death Coil causes your next Scourge Strike to deal 35% increased damage. I worked out 35% increased damage would be about 6,000 baseline extra damage. I found it was just more worthwhile going for the Infected Claws here. It's just easy. Your ghoul just goes up, smacks them, and can put an extra, you know, festering wound on for you. So that's easy. And then the tier 100 talent. So here we have Defile. PvP, I mean, sorry, not PvP based, PvE based, you know, AoE stuff. Pretty solid. It was always a nice ability to use as a blood DK in when tanking like dungeons and stuff in WoD. But Soul Reaper here really caught my attention. Strike an enemy soul for 39,000 shadow damage inflicting them with Soul Reaper for 5 seconds. So we get a 5-second window here. So if you burst a Festering Wound on an enemy afflicted by Soul Reaper, you'll get 7% haste for 15 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So I'll just simplify that for you. You put Soul Reaper on, it's 45-second cooldown on that ability, mind you, so remember that. 45-second cooldown, you put Soul Reaper on them. For the next 5-second window, you want to burst 3 Festering Wounds, aka get off 3 Scourge Strikes, in order to get that 21% haste increase of 15 seconds, because it'll stack 3 times, so 21% increased haste, as well as you get about 39k strike there. 45-second cooldown though. So I tested this one pretty heavily against Dark Abator here. So it replaces your Summon Gargoyle. Big 3-minute cooldown. So it's this big Valkyrie to attack the target for 15 seconds. Will spawn when you use this. And it will gain 1% increased damage for every 1 runic power you spend. So the key here is you have a 15-second window, but you want to dump as much runic power as you can when your Valkyrie is up here to increase its damage pretty much by almost 100%. I didn't test what it stacks to, but I mean, it did some damage. So I tested these a few times in 1-minute windows, 1 minute 30 windows, and just enough so I could get 2 Soul Reapers off to compare it to, the big 3-minute cooldown for Dark Abator. And generally, actually, I think for every test, pretty much, the Dark Abator tests come out to be the stronger choice there. Plus, it's less buttons to handle, so yeah, more simple to use. Fun as well, because you stack up a lot of runic power and then just dump it all when this thing's up, and you can line up a real nasty burst, especially if you had them in Asphyxiate, burst trinket, popped your Dark Transformation, had a 8 stack of Festering Wounds, and was just dumping Clawing Shadows and Death Cores one after the other. Like, you get some mean damage off in that window. So that pretty much runs through everything. I've tried to go through as much detail as I can there, because DK has always been one of those classes that's pretty complex. It's almost a bit simplified now, especially compared to back when we had Necrotic Strikes and had to get 5 Death Cores off in order to proc Dark Transformation. Now it's just a single button. So I hope that run through really helped you out and help explain how to play DK or what the goal is. So now we'll actually cover the general playstyle of DK. So stunning aside and things like that, we'll go over the general kind of rotation. So the first thing you want to do is open with the Outbreak, because you always want that Plague on them, and it lasts 21 seconds, okay? So open with that, there you go. And that's up, and then I like to hit my Blighter Rune weapon just at start to get some, 3 Festering Wounds up already. Now we've got a proc, so procs always are priority. So we'll get that off, because it's free. Now, Festering Wound up to 8. Here we have 8. We've got some Rune Suspense, so we're going to dump some Scourge Strikes into them to burst 2. Now we've got enough runic power to also get a Death Call off, but the priority here, you get most damage off, is with Clawing Shadows, okay? As long as we have enough Festering Wounds. So here, as you can see, our Ghoul actually just refreshed it for us, so that's really cool. So we're going to dump some Scourge Strikes in here. We've got 6 left, 5 left. We've got proc, we can use that. We're going to dump another Scourge Strike. Now we've got full runic power here, so it's worth trying to kite here and just getting off some sorry, what are they called? Death Cores there. But generally speaking, unless you have a full stack of runic power, it's just make sure you got your 8 stack or above 4, I would say. If you get 4 or 3, use a Festering Rune just to top them up, and then just use your runes on dumping those Clawing Shadows. If your Death Core procs, obviously use that, and if you top it off, use Death Cores as well. Now, that's pretty much it. The rest is all situational, or when you want to use up a big burst. So, actually, I'll show you this Wraith Walk here. So, this is a gap closer I find really interesting. We're not probably going to use that. Oh, chest ray. Shift F, go. 70% movement speed for 3 seconds. If you press any buttons, it cancels it. But did you see how quick I move then? How much of a getaway that is? or a gap closer if we needed it. Really interested by Blizzard putting that in. So I believe I covered the general rotation here. It's just keep the plague up, which I did not. This one's the plague. So you have to really watch with a dot class what's on them. There's an add-on, as you can see above the target dummy here, which makes it really easy to see their dots rather than looking at their unit frame. But I always pull my unit frame just down to my character here. Right click, move frame, unlock. By the way, some people ask me how to do things like that. But we're going to make sure we've got 6, 7 there. So now we're going to dump some runes into Scourge Strike, proc, Scourge Strike, dump some runic power because that's full. We're at 5, so we've got another Scourge Strike. Now at 4, so we're Festering Strike there. Got the full 4 stack, back up to 8. Easy. There's pretty much rotation on a couple of buttons. Mostly damage, like I said, is going to come from Clawing Shadows. Always use procs first with Death Cause. And you can always use them from range as well. So, there's a general rotation. As much detail as I can get. Now, let's say we want to line up a burst. So I haven't got it macroed, but we'll talk more about it also in macros. But Dark Transformation and your burst trinket don't share a cooldown. But what you want to do, the general rotation for a burst, okay? So you want to stun them with an Asphyxiate. Obviously, like pros, 2k plus players, like real high, you know, you can use your stuns offensively and defensively. But if you're just like general player, you want to stun them to be able to get off as much damage as possible. And as you can see, a big cooldown here is the Dark Abator, and it's all about getting increased damage for every runic power you spend. So the first thing you want to do is want to build up that runic power. We've got full stack Festering Wounds. We've got our Virulent Plague on there. A Virulent Plague, that's how you say it. And here we just want to build up by hitting Scourge Strikes our runic power. Full stack of that. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to stun, burst trinket, Dark Transformation, and get our Valkyrie up. And now here, just dump runic power because it's going to boosts its damage. So we spent all our runic power there. Hit it up a few more times with Scourge Strike, dump more runic power. It's just really get off as much as you can because, as you can see there, it was only a 15-second window. But that is honestly all there is to a DK burst. You've got 3 buttons. You've got your Valkyrie, your Dark Abator ability, your Dark Transformation, and your Burst Trinket. And that's pretty much it. Obviously, you can wait for your Proc Trinket to come up as well. But, yeah, not too many buttons. And just a few things to note when playing Unholy DK is to always make sure your Plague's on them. It's just with Outbreak, a 1 button, only costs a rune, no cooldown on it. So, no real reason to forget about it or not have it up. So always keep that up. And then always keep your stacks pretty high so you can dump all your damage into Clawing Shadows. So there you have it. So that's about going to wrap up the general idea of a DK. Remember, you've always got your Chains of Ice too. So along with your general rotation, a good thing to do is to open with Chains of Ice when you get near them, just to be able to stay on them and not have them run away from you and not, be able to get your Scourge Strikes off. The good thing with Clawing Shadows is, as you'll notice, I'm hitting it from here. It's actually 30-yard range. That's pretty nice. But yeah, just the Chains of Ice is real handy to get that extra slow on them. It actually doesn't do any damage, so there you go. Not really a necessity, honestly, because you got that ranged. Most of your abilities are ranged. The only time you really need to be on them is to stack up your Festering Wounds. But there we have it. Okay, very detailed run through of the DK. And we have our Anti-Magic Shield as our defensive ability to take less damage. Our Icebound Fortitude breaks stuns and reduce damage. We also have Army of the Dead, a 10-minute cooldown though, so I think it's still a pleb thing to do to use it in duels, so remember not to do that. But now we'll just cover macros and end the video. So, some macros that I don't actually have in my bar yet because I haven't gotten to too much arena, is you're going to want a Focus stun for Asphyxiate. So this is so you can handle multiple people. Say we're attacking this dummy. As you can see, my pet is going nuts on him. But we want to be able to manage his healer, okay? So while we have this guy selected, if we have our focus stun down here, I'll set it to H, we can be hitting this old mate over here, and then stun old mate 2 with one button, but for some reason it won't work because it's green. But there you go. Well, you don't have to select him, and you can, you know, be controlling him. It's a very controlling thing to be able to handle 2 people at once. So you want, because of that, you want a focus stun. I'll try and remember to put these in the description below too, so you can just like copy and paste them into your WoW or copy them. Focus stun. You want a focus grip to interrupt a big cast they might have. And you also want, I have a focus mind freeze for if I'm close enough to them. Normally I just select them, and then because I have E and R as select arena enemy 1, arena enemy 2, and F for arena enemy 3. So I can just select any of them, just mind freeze with one button, so that's easy enough. But other than that, there is not that many macros you're going to need for Death Knight, which is really handy. The other one I have actually is on the minibar right there, is Gnaw. So if you pop up your pet abilities, which is not that one, it's this one, you'll see that your Ghoul has Claw that he'll do whenever he wants, Leap that he can also do whenever he wants, but Gnaw I have deactivated so I can use that when I want. 1.5 minute cooldown, stuns for 1 second. So the whole goal of this is if someone is trying to cast maybe a healer, or maybe there's a Destro lock you have set as focus. This is Destro lock right here, and you're trying to hit his mate, you're being on his healer. Now this Destro may very well be free to cast some meaty chaos bolts on you, but you can manipulate him and stop this. So if you have him selected as your focus, you can focus stun him with one button. That stuffed up his first chaos bolt. He gets out, he's like, okay, now I've got him, I'm going to chaos bolt him now. Then you can focus grip him just by hitting one button, but I don't have it on my bar. Stuffed up his second chaos bolt, and while you're still on his healer, absolutely wrecking his face, you can also interrupt his third chaos bolt with your pet stun, Gnaw, which is this one. I don't know why that didn't work. Yeah, there we go. You stunned him for 1 second to interrupt the cast. 1 second stun is not going to do too much other than interrupt their gameplay. And finally, if you get close enough, you can mind freeze to cancel his fourth chaos bolt. So pretty controlling actually, you know, when you put them all together and in a chain sequence. And for the fifth one, you can anti-magic shell to stop that. So yeah, chaos bolts and warlocks are really not going to like Unholy Death Knights. And by then your Asphyxiate is back off cooldown, as you can see. But there we have it. There's the macros for Unholy Death Knight. I just have Focus Grip, Focus Asphyxiate, and Focus Gnaw. Or a, actually it's not Focus Gnaw. I think I just select them because that's why I didn't go off. Yeah, it's just a macro that lets me choose when to use the Gnaw. But you could also have, I don't want to change actually. You could also have a focus one. Again, I'll try and put these in the description below. We don't need a Lichborn anymore. A Lichborn here, that's gone. And unless you want a burst macro, you don't need much anymore. You don't need stance changes or any of that. So that is actually going to wrap up the video here. I actually feel like I went pretty in depth with the Unholy DK guide, so I hope this helped you out a heap. If it did, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys soon with more WoW content. What's good, YouTube? The free patch for Legion is here, and no one knows what is going on. All these classes are different, and overhaul everything. So I've been playing around, dueling people pretty much for the last 24 hours, you know, to say. And you know, I've found out a few things that I want to put out there, but please keep in mind this is free patch, so Blizzard are going to be listen to feedback and changing things along the way. We still don't have our artifact weapons or our that's the wrong one, or our honor talents down here, which spec into them may cause other